Please welcome back Mary Rowe.
I didn't do great in math, but I know I need another chair. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pace, which I'm good at. Thank you. All set. Do we have enough water? We need another water, too. Can another water magically appear? Someone will bring us, or you might have to share. Here. No, I'll take one for the team. If I start drooling, they'll send out CPR. Hi, back, everybody. Okay, so we've had interesting sort of narrative arc this morning around responsiveness and what resilience might look like. We've had nature, we've had art, we've had policy, and now we're going to talk about tech. It's the same kind of balancing act that I think we've been doing through the last couple of days, is maintain this conversation about that intersection between people and place and what are the different elements. And these three folks are, to me, just terrific examples of my well-worn adage about how you make lemons out of lemonade. Because when Sandy hit, we had an opportunity here to invent some things, to be innovative and responsive in a different kind of way, and see if there were ways that we could actually generate some different kinds of solutions that would not only benefit New York and make us more resilient, but could then be generating economic development and also potentially different kinds of approaches that could be used in other cities. So I'm really pleased to have the three of you here. These three were part of something called RISE, which was initiated by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And it was about the relationship between technology and primarily energy. But they put together a kind of competitive process. You guys duked it out. And I remember I was asked to be a technical reviewer. I knew nothing, but they wanted to see what I would say back. And I reviewed all these different applications. And I was just so impressed by the resourcefulness of really every scale of entrepreneur to say, here's a particular response, particularly around how you could bring small businesses back, how critical that is to the resilience of any neighborhood. And it really stirred me. I talked to the EDC guys, and now we're in trouble. I talked to the EDC guys and said it was really, to me, exactly indicative of the kind of positive thing that can come out of some kind of an extraordinary challenge, which is what resilience is about. So we're fortunate here to have David Gibbs, Pamela Puchalski, and Marcus Quigley. And they're going to each tell you about their particular innovation and how it's going to be rolling out. And then we're going to have a conversation about what does that leave us and what are our sort of next steps around resilience. So, yes? You want to go first, David?
Yeah.
Welcome back to MAS. We're happy to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So the first slide that you're seeing was kind of the root of the project. And this is actually a later stage. And actually, the next slide will actually be the earlier stage. But what it was is just after Hurricane Sandy, a group of friends and I went down to the Rockaways, and we began to deploy small-scale solar systems. So photovoltaic electrical systems. They started out, when I say small scale, as just being phone chargers. So these were very simple objects that I actually pulled together. There were parts and components that I had. They were actually, some of them were solar lanterns that I was actually about to send to Africa. And I just brought them down to the Rockaways, left them there. And from what I understand, they charged like over 400 phones or something over a period of a few days. What then began to happen is some momentum began to pick up. We began to get support from an organization called Solar One, Consolidated Solar, and of course you guys know Solar City. And they started deploying larger scale trailers all over the 5 boroughs. So they had one in Staten Island, they were deploying them in Coney Island, and we coordinated with them on what they were doing down in the Rockaways and helped them to deploy the ones across the peninsula. The image that you see here is a system that was then later donated by Global Green. And that system was installed on the Rockaway Beach Surf Club, which during the storm we initially put a smaller off-grid system to provide them electricity for lighting and things like that because they were a rescue center. They were providing food, they were a place where you could provide donations, and pretty much people from the community were coming to get some sort of, I guess you could say, respite from everything that was going on around them. So this system was actually installed by, you can see me in the picture, and the gentlemen around me are actually students of mine from Pace University. So they actually volunteered, did the full installation. The other gentleman right next to me is Thomas Gately. He's a local solar installer based here in New York City, and he actually provided some of the permitting and technical aspects. Ooh, there we go. This next slide is actually a good buddy of mine, Walter Myers, landscape architect, and we were actually kind of, with his wife, were the start of Power Rockaways Resilience. This is much earlier. What you see there are actually handmade solar panels that were made by students from Manhattan Comprehensive Night and Day High School. And that's a workshop that I've been doing for many years with Solar One and then continue to do, where we work with a gentleman named John Burke, and he works all around the boroughs with like community gardens, whoever, making actual solar panels, taking cells, soldering them together, encapsulating them. So these were the smaller generators with the phone chargers that were initial. What this all led to was an expansion into the RISE entry, which was essentially what we called safe space. And essentially, it's a kit of parts. It's a resiliency toolkit. It's looking at the sites, every small business, and picking out the technologies that will apply to those, whether it's telecommunication technologies, solar thermal, photovoltaic, with electricity, with battery backup, wind, and also we did cellular phone boosters for telecommunications. So these mixtures of technologies, we begin to look across the peninsula and figure out what sites, what technologies will be applicable. And we went initially from a part 1 of 12 sites to a total now of 30. So we're doing 30 small businesses now. And that's what we're working on. Kind of the extension of that is to do workforce development and actually train locals on the installation of these various types of systems. So that's something that will carry on long after the systems are all commissioned. And that's really kind of the end game.
It's terrific because to me this is just an example of something, a no-brainer that we should be doing anyway, you know. So the Sandy episode incented us to do these kinds of things and to be able to find where are the potential to do these kinds of projects now that make us more resilient, whether this is Sandy or not. We should be doing this anyway. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
Exactly.
Okay, Pamela, tell us about your piece.
There's a very strong thread between David's work and the work that we're doing at Resilient Communities of the Resilient Communities program of New America. And it started New America's work with something called the Open Technology Institute that is based in Washington as part of New America in early 2012 when the Red Hook Initiative, which is also one of the other winners of RISE and could easily be here on the stage with us, approached New America to set up a mesh network, and I'll talk about what that is, communication system that's community owned and managed to do various aspects, whether that was community radio or also monitoring stop and frisk. And so OTI, the Open Technology Institute, provided some seed resources and guidance to RHI to help them set up, and very much as David explained, our approach has been to train locals to actually do the design and installation work, and that's the photograph you see there in the New York Times cover, to actually be the ones who maintain and program the network so that when Sandy hit, you actually had locals on the ground, and this communication system was actually what was used to help deliver resources to residents that were really hard hit in Red Hook. So from that, we won a competition to, as part of RISE, to work now in 6 neighborhoods, and that is no small task. And our approach, again, learning from our work with Red Hook and also Detroit, where we piloted a program co-designed with a local organization there around digital stewards. That's what we call the local residents who are actually, we bring capacity and training to help them understand what this slide means. That's basically a snapshot of a mesh network of what you see, where they're basically small nodes, routers, a server that is installed to create a closed communication circuit for residents, and again, can provide internet connectivity if you plug into that. So again, our work now is to work in 6 neighborhoods that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy and to address a lot of the workforce training, job skilling by employing local residents.
Just looking at this, one of the things, again, another example of something that we should have regardless whether there's a Sandy incident or not, and how Sandy's made us suddenly be aware of this. We heard Maya Wiley yesterday talking about universal access to broadband, and I'm old enough to remember when redundancy was actually a bad word. Does anybody remember that phase when we were eliminating redundancy? Because redundancy is now important, I've learned. You want these multiple layers. And so having a mesh network like this that actually supersedes, so when the internet goes down, we all know from Sandy how many of us were running to the Starbucks to see if we could get a charge or get somebody else's wireless signal. So I just think this notion of us reinforcing that the city is layered and that we need multiple systems, multiple lines of defense, right? Okay, Marcus, talk to us about Boston. Well, out of Boston, talk to us about what you're doing.
I'm from Boston.
You're from Boston.
So we really believe at many levels that most of the biggest challenge that we have and barriers to making our cities more resilient are disconnections between information and action. But we live in a really interesting time around information. And this project, the work that we're showing as part of RISE NYC, is really to bring information together, not only to inform, but to directly take action to prevent flooding. So it's an interesting merger of things that we really didn't even have it available 3 or 4 years ago on the technology side. But what we actually do is we go out to individual businesses that are part of the RISE program and directly assess their risk. So this is very concrete information. Do they have a low-lying basement window? Do they have a back door that is subject to flooding? Do they have a low-level parking lot or a storm drain? And take that information and we store it up in the cloud. We're able to merge that information then in real time with what's going to happen with storm surge and what's going to happen with the weather to deliver back to the owners information in real time about what their actual risk is. So it's one thing to get a message from the city that says you're in zone A and this is a bad situation for you. It's another to get a message that says this is probably a good time to sandbag your back door. And have that be a concrete and meaningful to you as an individual. But we're not willing in this project just to be satisfied with having people receiving information. The solution actually takes direct action. So we call this actual flood proofing, automated flood proofing, low-cost automated flood proofing, where that information, in addition to being sent out, can be directly fed to retrofit components at these properties to prevent flooding directly. Oops, hopefully I didn't click too many times. So this is really what it looks like. Real-time dashboards to people anywhere there's an internet connection. This information, obviously, the forecast network is one of these fantastic resources that we've developed as a country where we actually know what is going to happen probabilistically before it happens. We're able to leverage it here in a very personal way. So delivering back, as you see in the bottom right, information very directly about someone's property, about what that means to them. What is the mean sea level going to get to? What does that mean for my basement door or my window or for my stock that's stored in the basement or my electrical mechanical systems? Are there things that I can do? And then helping people make those decisions. And then, like I said, the active flood proofing component in the top right is that even without the people taking action on their own, that the systems can react directly to reduce flooding.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marcus. Again, well, first of all, is probabilistically a word?
It is in my world.
That's a fantastic word.
I've heard it before.
It should be on someone's bingo card, probabilistic. I love that word. It's interesting, all three of you are talking about technologies that actually empower people or businesses. And you know, we had some varying presentations yesterday, didn't we, about technology and the extent to which they empower or disempower people, I guess. But this is why we always, at MAS, always talk about community-based resilience, that we're always trying to push forward the idea that the really good ideas are going to come from the people that are closest to the challenge. It's a good urbanistic thing, I think, to emphasize that. And I'm interested that each of you is developing that. So these aren't master-controlled, scary systems.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to put the technology into the hands of the folks that are on the front line, delivering services, fighting for whatever that basic livelihood is when the risk or threat hits.
Right.
That is such a key issue.
It's like a principle, and it's like a distributed, it's a bit like
Yeah.
redundancies in electrical grids. You want to have it distributed as much as you can so that,
That's it.
so that things can be fed up from the ground up. It's interesting, too, the emphasis that EDC, and I really respect them for this, that they put on local small business, right? I mean, we anecdotally know this from our experience around different cities that have gone through these things, that the local business is going to come back sooner.
Yeah.
Because, David?
Well, in the Rockaways, I know many local small businesses, like restaurants and things like that, became, again, places where people gathered.
Yeah.
Either just to get food or just to get warm or whatever. So, again, in our process, that's what we saw. We re-identified some of the sites that we had already worked with.
Yeah.
Like St. Gertrude's Church was, they had a huge setup, and it was all organized by Occupy Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Yana, You Are Not Alone, which was another community organization. And then there was a few other restaurants around the corner from me, but they all served a role,
Yeah.
right? So it's a thing of now taking that and what they already kind of almost organically became and kind of reharnessing that,
Yeah.
and reestablishing it, and making sure that people understand. What I kind of paralleled what we were doing was the fallout shelters
Yep, sure.
of the old days, schools, right? They were like schools, fire stations, things like that. There were places people knew, sirens went off, that's where they would go.
David, you're just a perfect segue to the rest of the morning, which is going to talk about the civic commons and spaces and how important they are, whether it's a school or a church or a library. We talked about it a bit last night, or it could be a local bar. We did consultations this spring with various communities in all 5 boroughs about where were the roots of resilience. And in Staten Island, the guy put up his hand and said, "It's my bar." I was the one that had the generator. Everybody came to me, and they're still coming. So, I mean, this is part of our informed, I think, our notion of how we have to build this kind of collective thing up. So as you now implement these projects, which are remarkable and I think models, what are the challenges you're running into? You had no gray hair, David, when it started.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and then...
What are the problems? One, our initial project started out when we first put the proposal in as 12, and we did it as a phase 1, phase 2. Well, we won for both phases, so now we're trying to identify those other sites, which actually is a good problem to have, quite honestly. But it is a thing of making sure that the sites that we do are, the logistics are well done, so that the idea is that we're going to have a site about, like within 7 miles of any resident on the peninsula, so literally like a 5-minute walk or so. That's one thing. The other thing is getting kind of the word out to the community and making sure that everybody's on board, and then also making sure that people who want to take the opportunity to learn about the technologies have that and can get on board and can get trained, and so that they can maybe take this and either initiate a career, you know, or a career change, and that's kind of the thing. So working with local organizations has been a big thing, identifying who those people are and what those local organizations are, to figure out, right, who are the right people to talk to, so that I'm not, you know, making new inroads and reinventing the wheel.
Right.
There's already people down there. There's already been people working down there. So it's just a thing of kind of harnessing what they've already done.
What about you guys?
I think you know, one of the things that was really important to us is to come up with a solution that would be applicable very broadly.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to do a pilot project and to work really hard with, you know, in this case, HUD money infused into an effort, but to come up with something that can be meaningful at a grand scale. And so we actually have changed our scope around to make sure that there are meaningful deliverables throughout the project to the participants. I did want to quickly go back to one thing that we think is really important around technology. I know a large number of the proposals in this effort is focused on technology, but in the end, you said at the local level, the thing that is most important, I think, is actually the outcomes for the people.
Yeah.
And the technology is interesting, and you know, we're very embedded in it, and it's fundamental to the delivery. But to the extent, even like around our technology, that the technology can step into the background,
Right.
and that the result is very human. I mean, even about mesh networking, for example, it's about the outcome of not losing the connection.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not about knowing exactly what the hardware components are that make that mesh, or that it even is a mesh network. You should feel, when you have technology integrated into a city very effectively, that you're getting the city that you want to live in. Not that your life is more complicated and there's more information flowing to you, and that you're increasingly having the burden of making decisions on your own. So I think that's one of the things we've really tried to do.
So I'm going to pitch right to Pamela and just lead up with this and just say this. You guys are all doing fabulous things. So inspiring.
Thank you.
Who knows about it? And how do we, I mean, are things being coordinated?
Yeah, I mean, Mary, you know my setup on this one. Like our biggest challenge, everything that has been said by David and Marcus, but how do you align and leverage this work?
Yeah.
Like you could easily take our 3 projects and bring it to a small business altogether. And we're beginning to have those conversations, so time is on our side because the contracting process goes slow. I mean, it's
Yeah.
HUD funding coming into the city. This is really different. We just haven't practiced that way from a policy making or a kind of urban development scale to meet these challenges that are required for resilience. So the aspect of kind of joining forces, getting the word out, putting, you know, the technology solutions, yes, into the hands of residents, but mostly empowering them to understand what they can use these technologies to do, to have immediate benefit today.
Yeah.
It's not about, oh, next time Joaquin dodging a bullet, but like, how can you use this stuff today to lower your energy bills or to just be more prepared? And frankly, that community connectivity and
Yeah.
building strong social networks is what matters, we believe, but it is no small lift.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's about strengthening local economies and local social networks and building social capital. This is all the meat and potatoes of urbanism that you guys are on the front lines doing. So we're so appreciative that you're doing it, and let's think about how to coordinate that. Now, just to give the audience a sense of the potency of the challenge ahead of us, because these three and many, many others are doing these great things at the macro local level. Let's think about a really big question that you were asked about earlier in the session, and my panelists won't have a chance to respond except to resonate internally with what the result is. Show us, or tweet. Show us we're going to wrap this up, but show us the result of that poll, could you, about managed retreat?
Wow.
Okay, then. So I guess we'll be back next year talking about this. The question is, can we connect people and what people are suggesting and where government and policy is going? Would you join me in thanking these three fabulous innovators and entrepreneurs, Marcus and Pamela and Jaden? Just sit for a sec. We can't be scared of questions like this because this is who we're working with. This is the future. We can work this out.